Thanks for the gifts though, dude.
Dude, got you, man.
Yeah, man. Like, I mean, every time we get together, you give me cool gifts. I mean, the last time there's the hat that I'm wearing now, plus an awesome, Overwatch Collective hoodie, which I actually get a lot of comments on when I'm out. They're like, hey, what's that about? So I get to tell the story, which is great. So this time I got a patch. Can never have enough patches for the packs and for the chest rigs and the plate carriers and all the other cool stuff. But more importantly, like a full PMAC of 5.56, like this right here.
Yeah.
Like I got to be honest, I've never been gifted one of these. Usually it's the other way around. Like I'm begging for the stuff to fill these up. So thanks very much, dude.
Yeah, of course. I know that's like my go-to gift. Like fuck the bottle of whiskey. Like, dude, you get a full mag.
It's a bit unique. I honestly, now all you got to do is get these things like laser engraved with the T.O.C on them. But this is amazing. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Every time someone helps out or dude, I borrowed my neighbor's golf clubs once and I left 2 full mags in there with him. He's like, I was like, here's some brand new golf balls and 2 full AR mags.
Dude, you can't go wrong with full mags, full AR mags, particularly this day and age. So God bless America.
Right?
And God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you. I love it. I just wish we had a rifle here.
Next time. I mean, what a crazy outdoor venue this is. I don't want, this is we're going to call this our secret spot from now on. But I have to tell you, so I was only about on the way up, maybe 6-7 miles as the crow flies from here. It was literally 101 degrees. It dropped more than 30 degrees in less than like 6 miles. I think I need to live here.
Yeah, I absolutely love it out here. I know, Eli, when we first met, you're like, I live in Half Moon Bay. I'm like, me too.
Yeah, this location is amazing. So outside, for those of you watching on YouTube, like we're outside. I got Greg here from the Overwatch Collective, who's been on the show before. We're missing Jesse tonight. I'm a little bummed, but I understand. Jesse's a busy dude. But huge part. He's the other half of the Overwatch, and there's some. I think, us getting together tonight was really just me kind of reaching out and going, hey, Greg, it's Suicide Awareness Month. You guys do so much work in the field, particularly with the first responder community, military community, around the topics of mental health, emotional health. And oftentimes a lot of times that comes with the talk of suicide. And I know that whole topic of suicide is a lot of what inspired the podcast that you guys do and the work that you're doing with the foundation, the nonprofit foundation, to raise funds and first off, raise awareness around basically first responder mental health and emotional health, but also more importantly is getting them the help that they need, which for people that don't know is much easier said than done. So maybe we just talk a little bit about T.O.C. and what you guys have been up to, because you guys have been busy, super busy. Yeah, it quickly turned into almost like a full-time job, essentially. Thankfully, we have our board of directors and then my girlfriend, Kelsey, to help out. But on top of us being super busy, and I know Jesse wish he could be here, but he's got a wedding and he actually has a full head of hair. So he's got to get it prepped for the wedding. That's why he's not here. Well, can we time out for a second? Because I feel like, I've been following you guys on social media, obviously, and I think pretty much everybody you guys know has been married in the last like 3 or 4 weeks. You guys have been in one wedding after another.
Yeah. Jesse got married. Greg, TechMed Sims got married. Right. That was in Tahoe. So we were in Tahoe 2 weekends in a row.
Great venue.
Great venue. Yeah, love it. And one was in North, one was in South. So we got best of both worlds.
Yeah. That's awesome. You guys taking time out for one another. There's a lot of the guys in the community, right? So, people within the community that are tying the knot. So when you getting married, dude?
Who knows?
Right on the spot.
Barely. I'm glad that this worked out tonight. This was last minute. This is supposed to be my normal work night.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I work Monday to Thursday, but I leave, like I was telling you, I leave Sunday for Texas for like less lethal training in Texas. So
yeah. So what's that about? You are, I know you've been a firearms instructor with your current agency. I think you're on the SWAT team still.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things you're doing, and now you're going off to get more training so you can bring it back to the team. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just more and more training, like, and we'll get into this, and when we talk about mental health, and especially amongst the first responder and military community, but everybody else as well, where you just get so much overloaded on your plate and so much put on your plate. So yeah, I'm going to Texas with 3 other guys, and we're going to talk all about the taser, pepper spray, the 40 millimeter like beanbag guns, essentially, because not many agencies are running like 12 gauge shotguns anymore. That's like the designated less lethal gun.
They're running the 40 mil. The 40 mic rifle.
Yeah, that or the 12 gauge shotgun, but it's like a dummy round.
Gotcha.
So yeah, we'll be out there in Corpus Christi, and there's a beach there. There's bars there, so get some really good training.
That's great.
Yeah, so
I think it's great. I remember talking to you about this before, and just kind of all the things that are on your plate. So my hat's off to you, man. And that said, I really appreciate you taking the time out for, me tonight and the listeners tonight to kind of get into, again, a topic that I am hugely passionate about. And that is one, just taking care of the people that take care of us. And that is a very broad spectrum of people. Those in the first responder community, the military community. I'm really drawn to it. And a lot of that draw has happened. I feel like I always felt that, but I had a real calling to it after I sat down with you and Jesse on the show, and you and Jesse and JP, and we kind of just walked through a lot of what's kind of going on and what inspired the Overwatch collective. So maybe going back, we got a little distracted there, but maybe going back, talk about what's been going on with the Overwatch lately.
Yeah. So basically our podcast, we just hit 5,000 downloads, over 50 episodes, and we have,
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. We have 20 episodes that we need to plan and schedule.
It's work, isn't it?
It's a full-time job. And then there's the 501c3 nonprofit side of it, where you have to stay within compliance with the IRS. We're actively paying for our audience to go to therapy. So 2 spouses of firefighters just finished their 11 weeks of therapy.
Amazing.
Which we helped them go to. And then another 4 just started their group intake today, actually.
Congrats, man. That is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So that's like the ultimate goal. And then the real big goal, at least for me, was to actually have a first responder or a vet kind of use us as a resource and then pay for them to go. So we're in progress.
Like a scholarship kind of thing?
Yeah. And that's kind of how we have to word it with the nonprofit side of it. So we have 3 police officers that are coming to us after their EAP program failing them. Kaiser, which we'll discuss, failed them as well. And one reached out to us. He was like, dude, I've never been this depressed. I'm gaining weight. So we were able to connect him with a therapist that works with first responders within California. So, and then we'll financially assist him to go do it. So
you guys have been doing great work, man. I mean, that is important shit. I think there's a lot of things that I've learned about it. I think there's a lot of things that I sort of already knew that have now been confirmed and through conversations, but I'm always enlightened and I'm always just kind of switched on to new things that are happening. But just going back, I mean, I remember when we first started, when we first talked, you were just kind of getting started on this whole process. You had literally, I think within days before we first sat down, had just gotten the IRS paperwork kind of handled. And we were talking about that a little bit. And now you've been able to help these people. You're actively helping these people, and you're actively in process of putting things together to where you can help more people in the community. And one of those things that's coming up that I really want to make sure we touch on is, first off, you had an anniversary party. Your 1-year anniversary party was just a couple months back.
Right in the area where our secret spot is right now. Yeah,
which is fantastic.
And that was super cool because we hit up that brewing company and we were like, hey, this is kind of what we do. This is our mission. Like, can we have something here? And they're like, dude, hands down, don't even need to pay anything. And yeah, it was awesome. I know you and CC came out and some merchandise, take some photos, and honestly, it was cool just to get the community together. And
that was the biggest part for me, man, is I got to really connect with some people. I had met Greg Simpson before, and we had been on the range together and hung out for a brief period of time, but we really got an opportunity to kind of know one another at this get together, and that's what these things are really about is that network. And as a result, it took us a while, but we were able to finally get Greg on the show and kind of talk through his own things, and such amazing feedback we got from sort of the community at large. And I don't just mean first responder community, I mean beyond that, just like, hey, this really touched me in this way, or this helped me get through this thing with my spouse or my partner or with my brother or my sister. But then there was the whole, medical aspect where that's kind of turned into an animal all in and of itself. Just, other medics or other people in the profession reaching out, just going, hey, we need to talk about this more. This was awesome. Love to hear more of this stuff. But coming up very soon, just in a couple of weeks, by the time this thing drops, we'll only really have about 2 weeks before, I think before we get to the big fundraiser event that you guys have been working on. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit and just kind of let people know what's going on. Yeah.
And I heard you mention it on the episode with Greg. So thank you. Eli, shout out to Eli, dropped it to me after I sent him some pictures and behind the scenes when he was in the studio taking some pictures of Nick's episode.
Right.
Saturday, September 24th. It's going to be at Old Princeton Landing. Is our second annual fundraiser.
Great spot, by the way. Great bar.
Super cool.
Great bar.
The owner there, Brian, his father was in the Marine Corps, Vietnam, highly decorated Marine. He lives in Arizona now, but he's going to be flying up for the event. And same thing as the brewing company. They're like, hey, we don't even want you to pay anything, no deposit. This is on us. So that's just how amazing this community is, which is super cool. And then thankfully, my girlfriend Kelsey's the prior event planner. So I'm like, go to work. So she crushed it. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, but we have 2 guest speakers who both attempted suicide. One was a prior paramedic who started a massive nonprofit now, which kind of helps out the first responder community specifically with self-awareness of post-traumatic stress and when they're going through high anxiety times and how to combat that. And then the other one was a prior Marine. So he's from the East Coast, and we're flying him up, putting him up at a hotel. And he attempted suicide via pills twice and then one via hanging.
Man, I heard a little bit of that clip, through your Instagram site. Man, so it's tough to listen to. And I mean, the amount of courage it takes to be able to tell that story and come out the other side. My hat's off to these people. I have to be honest, man. I listened to that today, and it was like, I finally checked in with myself. I mean, I'm going to be at this event where we absolutely were going to sponsor this thing right from the get-go and be part of it. But I'm like kind of in this state right now where with some of the conversations I've been having lately, and again, going back to you mentioned Craig and Nick, and we've had you guys on, we've had Pranay on, who's a firefighter, and we've had Rick Field, who comes from the Department of Corrections and that stuff. I'm really going to have to do some work to emotionally prepare for, I'm sure, what's going to come out there. It gets me, man. It really gets me. So I know there's going to be some stories told, and it should be a celebration of what you guys are doing, but also at the same time, there's very real stories and very real challenges that come out here. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also, I got to be honest, I'm trying to get my shit together about it, because I think it's going to be, tough at the same time. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it is a celebration, and it's all about raising funds to send our audience to therapy and retreats and whatever they may need to help them or their families, and ultimately reduce the number of suicides. That's the ultimate goal. And like we do have fun things, like we'll have a live cigar rolling station there. We have sponsors. We have the banner. We're going to have live music. We do have a surprise that I did tell you, but I'm going to keep it out of this. Okay. So it's a surprise for everybody that's coming, and it has to do with the national anthem, because we're Team America.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it right.
America, buddy.
But yeah, with the guest speakers, it's kind of like, have fun, hang out, the raffle auction items. That's great to attract people and raise some funds. But I think when our guests do talk, that'll kind of be like a reality check to be like, hey, this is really why we're here. And like, thank you to these two amazing people that are going to come and share their story of their darkest time in their entire life. So it'll be, it'll kind of be a little reality check and a gut check, but also that'll get everybody to kind of be like, okay, what they're doing is serious, or this really is a serious matter.
No doubt about it, man. I mean, I feel fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. And again, like now I sort of felt a calling to this, and I don't want it to be all about this, but the amount of feedback and the people that have reached out, and I have people reaching out going, hey, that I never knew about you guys. I'm so glad I found your content. This really helped me through this situation. Or how do I get in touch with these guys? Or do you have any resources that I can reach out to? Now I feel like, we are bridging the gap at some level, and that's helpful for me. And it's not about me. It's really about spreading the message. But at the same time, it makes me feel, I do feel a certain level of fulfillment knowing that, and all of you guys say this when you come on, it's like, if I can just help one person, in the challenges that they have, it's all worth it for me. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also trying to prep for it in a different kind of way. But I'm looking forward to having a good time and seeing all the people and meeting all the people that have been on the show, that are coming. And as and having said that, there's people that have reached out that do work with you guys that are like, hey, looking forward to meeting you, which is just awesome.
Yeah.
Again, in that case, and as a result, we're actually going to have a few more people on the show this month. We got a great lineup of guests to kind of share more of the message from a broader perspective. Some therapists. We're going to have some other LEO on the show, former military, to kind of talk through their own stories. Which this is what I've heard from a lot of these people is like it's hugely therapeutic for them to be able to tell their story in a different kind of way on a different platform. It's not sitting in front of a therapist, but the quote I got yesterday was, it's like therapy on steroids, that they just get like this huge relief in talking about it, which they weren't able to do or didn't feel safe doing for so long, has been, a huge, I guess, just kind of awakening for them to be able to do it more and feel more comfortable doing it going forward. So, I think you guys are doing amazing work. But I think it's also, while the Overwatch is more geared towards, LEO, first responders, military, look, I don't want to leave out the dispatchers, the medics, the firefighters, all those people that are involved in those
nurses,
all that stuff. I lived in a house with my mom's was a nurse for more years than I can count. And I know the stuff that she went through. And she's a champion, but it goes beyond that. It goes so far beyond that. I mean, the suicide awareness, particularly now, I mean, after the things that, sort of people have faced in the last few years, is just this much bigger issue that I think people really want to give credit to, because it's not fun to talk about. And unless you've been touched by it personally, it's a little obscure. It really is. So this is kind of like a full, sort of a personal disclose, in that I've personally actually never been touched, by somebody that I know closely that's, taken their own life. So I don't have any experience with that, but, and as a result, all I can do is try and imagine what that might be like. But, I think for the families, and that said, for the families and the friends and the community, from what they've shared with me, it's something that we talk about until the funeral's over, and then we're supposed to forget about it and kind of move on. Maybe you can kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, suicide, when we did our first suicide episode, it was a service member who actually at one point had a gun in his mouth, and his cousin came in and ripped it out of his hands, and thankfully he did not complete that attempt. But it's definitely the hardest topic to discuss, especially when you're sitting across the table from someone who has made an attempt or has lost someone close to them, like a family member. But with the numbers of suicide, the rate that we're losing first responders, service members, even like just our community in general, after COVID-19, during COVID-19, being on lockdown, the number of suicides increased dramatically. And nowadays, like a couple weeks ago, Kaiser Mental Health, they went out on staff and we heard a lot about it. Like the therapists there, they want to do whatever they can, but they're limited. Mm-hmm. So they're on strike, which means people are trying to make appointments. They can't get appointments for 3-4 weeks, but
meanwhile,
people need appointments.
It's very time sensitive.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. They're much like law enforcement or, you know, well, I got you talking too much. You got to keep that thing lit. But much like law enforcement, firefighters, particularly now, I mean, California's burning down right now. It's an interesting time. All the things that have happened over the last couple of years and how that's impacted our fire service as a whole for many, many different reasons, sociopolitical reasons, financial reasons, or economic reasons, or whatever else. We don't have enough firefighters to fight the fires that are out there right now. And it's interesting. We were just talking about this on the podcast about 6 months ago. Like, it's coming. Like we were in the spring. It wasn't even quite that. It was more like 4 or 5 months ago. It's coming, and what's going to happen? And now here we are. And so people are being asked to work overtime. Their bucket, if you will, of stress is already as full as it can get. And now we've dumped more on top of that. But it's not just the first responder that's dealing with that. It's the families and all the people that it trickles down to, the kids, along the way. So again, going back, like, it's kind of this taboo thing. And it's like, well, I don't want to bring it up because, so-and-so could be walking on eggshells. So I need to be walking on eggshells. And I guess the real question is like, how do we talk about it? How do we bring it out into the open, where we kind of start to eliminate the stigma of it's not okay to feel this way, which couldn't be any further from reality. Like, while it's not healthy to feel that way, it's okay to be that way. This is what's going on. We need to address it. How do we bring it out there, man? I mean, what are the tools and skills that you're learning in your journey here, your process?
Yeah, I mean, I ask myself that every day. I literally think about it every day, where I'm like, what can we do? What are we not doing? Asking the community, like, what more can we do to raise awareness, to stop the stigma, to reduce the numbers? And it's exactly what we're doing now. It's having people on to discuss mental health. And the more that we get it out there, the more that people hear stories and they can relate. So like the episodes that like we've had where, and you mentioned before, where they say it's like a therapy session on steroids, like we've done episodes, and I'm sure you have too. And like the one with Nick, where it's like, by the time you're done with the podcast, you are spent.
Oh man, I was exhausted.
You are so into the story. You're just emotionally attached. You're putting yourself in his shoes, the family's shoes, the scenario, where you're just so emotionally drained after it. But all it takes is to reach one person that is like, hey, I was going through that same thing, or I am currently going through that same thing. And maybe it's just one piece where it's like, hey, I've been drinking a lot, or I'm super depressed and been gaining a bunch of weight, but this is what I did. And if that helps one person and then they don't die by suicide, then that's a win. But it's getting this out there, talking about the signs, the symptoms, the whether suicide is selfish or not, saying committed suicide or saying dying by suicide or died by suicide. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it could be just one little thing that hits our audience and then trickles to another audience, another state, whatever it may be. But I think it starts with talking about it. And that's the cool thing about the podcast, where like when we first started ours, I've never listened to a podcast before.
Is that right?
We literally did episode 1 in Jesse's old apartment garage. It was super hot. We put flags up everywhere to make it look like
it wasn't a garage,
to cover the boxes up. and that was kind of it. And then our 7th episode, we had our first suicide episode. And then our second one was our second suicide episode, where her dad was in the Marine Corps, shot himself in the head. And she turned that around and became a dispatcher. Every time she got a call for service regarding someone contemplating dying by suicide, she related to that person. She's like, look, my dad died by suicide. This is the last thing you want to do. And she's gotten multiple commendations and awards for like making a difference and saving that person's life. So all of that into a little short answer is just discussing it, like what we're doing.
Right. Getting it out there. I think kind of going back, you were mentioning the process that it takes to actually even have that discussion. I mean, we've talked about this before, and I think it needs to be said again. So for those people that listen to the show or your show regularly, this might sound a little bit redundant, but there are challenges in having these conversations. And the challenges usually start with the stigma that's associated with having the conversation and the risk that's involved from a career perspective, and a trust perspective with your fellow officers or firefighters or unit members or whatever else it is, if you're having a tough time. And it gets minimized, in their own person's brain, or it can actually be, sort of the way it's been described, like Nick described it, as you put all these rocks in a backpack, over the time over your time, and eventually there's no more room in that backpack, and that backpack can't hold that load anymore, and it rips. But the things that are preventing you from not putting that rock or that episode or that incident in your backpack are the openness to having the conversation, which is ultimately what comes out in the end. It's like, if I'd just been maybe talking about this or acknowledging this issue or this red flag or this thing, then I wouldn't have gone down this path that can ultimately end, ultimately in taking one's own life. And we've already sort of articulated how that's become almost commonplace. And like a lot of other things in society now, people have almost become numb to it. Like it's like a regular, almost accepted thing. Like another officer took his life, or another teenager took their life, or another person took their life for whatever, because they couldn't cope anymore. They couldn't deal with it anymore. But you mentioned something a minute ago, which I want to go back to in terms of how tough it is sometimes to have these conversations. And you mentioned the whole, what is our modern medical health? I'm not even going to call it health care. I refer to it as health management or sick care. What does that system look like? And what does the typical process look like for an officer or somebody from in the first responder community that's connected to it some way? Because there's a like an EAP, what's it called? An EDP or EAP?
Yeah, Employment Assistance Program.
Right, an EAP program, right? And that's usually attached to some medical insurance, which in the state of California is generally attached to the Kaiser system.
Yeah.
Right. And so I have some experience with the Kaiser system on the non-first responder side. But I wonder if maybe you could just share kind of what your guests and the people that you talk to on a regular basis share about their experience in that system. And this is, and I bring this up not to badmouth Kaiser and say it's bad. That's not the point of this, but to give people a real perspective on what the reality of that situation actually is, if and when somebody is finally like, you know what, I need help. They have the courage. They're brave enough to come or they're at a point, there's this place where they're like, hey, I need help. Can somebody please help me? What happens next?
Yeah. And for the person, that's a huge step, right? Because the roller coaster, it's easier to go downhill. It's easy to get caught in
momentum.
And you're going downhill, but to go uphill, it takes something big to be like, okay, I finally reached that point. Step number one, I need to go talk to someone. I need to make an appointment, whatever it may be. Right. So for most departments, it's an employment. I can't even say now. Employment assistance program, or there's like a peer support group or team.
Which is not the same everywhere, right?
No, it's not. And my department kind of just started that process 6 years after losing one of my buddies to suicide. So it's a little delay. And then there's also some, like, with my history of doing the podcast and the Overwatch Collective and everything, which I don't agree with some of it. I'm not really involved with it because I have too much other stuff going on with the actual nonprofit. Mm-hmm. But back to like the emotional roller coaster of going downhill, you get all that momentum, you're depressed and you're looking for a sign to try to go up that roller coaster. Say you do that and you take that first step and you go make a Kaiser appointment, or an appointment with a therapist and say he or she has a year on, 2 years on, and then it's a first responder or a veteran bringing up these.
You mean the therapist themselves who's very kind of young in the game?
Yeah.
So you're talking about a person that's like kind of fresh into the game.
Yeah. Or,
which Kaiser is very, very known for, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great place to start as a young doctor.
Yeah.
But you're talking to a cop that's had 15, 20 years on the street.
Yeah. Or maybe even 1 year.
Yes.
But you have one, you have the therapist with Kaiser that maybe deals with family drama. You know, they don't see the normal first responder that often, or it's kind of a rare occasion. So, based on my experience, what we see is the first responder kind of getting that first step where it's like, okay, I can reach out for help. I'm going to go make an appointment. And he or she goes to share their story, their traumatic call for service, whatever it may be, to this therapist. And their first thought is like, is that really what you guys see?
Yeah, they have no idea. They can't even relate.
And then they don't even know what to say because they can't relate to it. So one of our guests, Mark, he was a paramedic. The call for service that sent him over was this. It was a medical call involving an infant, and the mother was on methamphetamines and was boiling her baby in the pot. It's on the stove, actively boiling. So
unbelievable.
That was the one that sent him over, and then he finally went through the EAP and went to Kaiser, and he told that therapist the story, and she didn't even have anything for him. And then he went back downhill.
Yeah, she probably gave her PTS.
Yeah.
I mean, that story in and of itself, you just shared the high level stuff. I mean, I can't imagine what the details are that are stuck in that person's and that medic's brain.
Yeah.
You know, and how they have to tell that story and relive that incident to try to get to a point where they can quote unquote get some help, right? So they have to, part of it is reliving things. Like you have to talk about it. You have to get it out there. And if you're telling somebody that just cannot comprehend or bottom line can't handle that kind of stuff, like what does that do to somebody? What does that do to you as the person that's dealing with all those issues? To me, that just tells me I am that fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I am so fucked up. This normal person over here, his or her reaction was like, oh my God, like you're so messed up.
I can't help you.
It's back down the roller coaster.
You're so messed up. I can't even help you.
Yeah.
And again, like not to point the finger, it just is the situation that they're often, you know, first responders are often faced with is what I've been learning, which I never even kind of thought of. There's also this, and you mentioned the kind of the overload in the system right now, in general. So many people, I mean, hey, listen, if you want a career path right now, you really want to help people, become a therapist, because try and reach out to somebody privately or through the system and schedule an appointment right now. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't get in. They're absolutely packed, and they're having to manage their time to like, hey, I could take more clients, take more patients, whatever, maybe make some more income or whatever else, but I'm slammed. And they have to onboard all that trauma from and all that energy, from the people that they're seeing, and have to deal with that. But you can't get in to see anybody so when time is of the essence, if somebody's reached a period of darkness where they're like, I've reached this point where I am at rock bottom and I have two choices. I can either come out of this, come up the other side of the roller coaster, or I can end this for myself and just put this pain to bed and I don't have to deal with it anymore. Having to wait 3 to 4 weeks for an appointment is an eternity.
It's unacceptable at that point. In my opinion, if you're in that dark place and you say, hey, I need help right now, if you don't get that help, we're probably going to lose that person.
And so what I've heard is, in some cases, depending on what agency you work for, what region of the state, county, nation you work in, you may have some immediate resources that you can go to. But what I found, particularly here in the state of California, is it's few and far between that there are agencies out there that have those kind of resources are like, hey, we need to get you in. I need to see you right now, come in right now, or whatever. It's like, hey, let's see what the calendar looks like and let's see what we can get you in for. I was stunned by that. Yeah. I was like,
unfortunately, it's even worse in the military side.
They don't get it. They get hardly anything.
I mean, you think it's already bad enough in the first responder side and the military side. There's been numerous incidences and stories of veterans calling the VA to try to get appointments and unsuccessful, and try another VA to get an appointment where, I mean, there's been times where we've had veterans walk into the lobby and say, you did this, and then they shot themselves in the head.
Wow.
And so number one is getting the resources out there and making sure that at any date, time, they know that they can reach out to this telephone number, the suicide hotline. Now they made it easier. So it's 988 instead of the full number, which that'll make things easier, maybe in my opinion, because it's easier to remember. And then the big scheme of things is that we can have all the resources available, and I'll talk about kind of our resources. But it takes that first step for that individual to say, okay, I need to talk to someone.
What are the hangups? What are the hangups? What's preventing somebody from actually reaching out?
I think it's the stigma, number one, and it's how are you going to be looked at?
Because these people are mandated reporters. So if you reach out to somebody and they feel, again, this is an evaluation by somebody that may be happening over the phone, or you're not actually seeing anybody, they're mandated to report that up to the state level or the agency level or whatever else. And the consequence of that is you lose your job effectively. Yeah.
Well, that's the long term. You lose your job. But so as an example, as a police officer, if you go up to someone in your peer support team or group and you say, hey, I'm in a dark place. I'm suicidal. This is what's going on. Divorce, custody, the wife or the ex-wife has custody, which is a big problem, which leads to suicide, which I have down in my notes, which is a big one. But they'll take the person's gun. If they keep them on the job, they'll keep them on light duty, like the front desk where they take in like walk-ins without a gun. And then every officer in the department knows
something's wrong.
Hey, Greg wasn't in briefing. He wasn't in briefing again this day. He's at the front desk without a gun.
Yep.
And then it's just like people start judging you. And then like you mentioned before, people are on like eggshells. And it's like, okay, do I go check on him?
Creates trust issues. Can I count on this guy? Can I count on this person in a stressful situation? And the answer is probably going to be
probably not. And then so it's having the resource there 24/7. And then it's also having a community that we can trust and ensuring that you're going to get the help without completely altering your life and like skylining you pretty much. So
again, that's a hang up, is I really need and want help, but the consequences of me asking for help mean I could lose my job. I could lose the trust of my team, my officers. These are my brothers and sisters here in whatever agency and whatever form of work that I might do. And I don't want to risk that. I find that to be extremely problematic.
Yeah.
And I wonder, how is it that we can be having the conversation differently as a whole, right? As a whole, to encourage people or to basically encourage the conversation, but maybe in a different way. I mean, you mentioned some things to me before we kind of came on tonight about maybe it's just having the conversation differently and putting it in a different light so that we're not triggering things. I have no idea what that is. Maybe you could share, because I don't, like I said, I've never had to face this head on except for maybe somebody like you across the table from me.
Yeah. And we just had my dad on an episode and he only mentioned 2 of his close friends that he was fellow officers with that died by suicide. A lot of people think that they're going to trigger someone if they ask the person if they're going through a dark time and they don't know how to ask or they don't know the signs and symptoms. So it's just like the education level isn't there, which also comes in with the awareness. And then it's like, do I just straight up ask this person? Like, Scott, are you going to hurt yourself?
So we're talking about the person on the other end that wants to be supportive or is noticing red flags or signs that are going on. What are some of those things that you could be maybe more aware of that people tend to be like, oh my God, I saw that, but I didn't learn that until it was too late. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So someone not being in their routine. Like if they show up on time to work and their uniform squared away and they seem like a happy person, they come in and they're super depressed or they're running late. Spending a lot of money is also a big thing. If you see people buying nice cars or going on a big trip.
Retail therapy type shit.
Yeah, where they're like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to spend all my money because I'm not going to be living any longer. Laziness, not working out,
kind of the fucking
out of
attitude.
shape. Yeah, kind of where it's like you're at the breaking point and you're gonna break away from your normal routine. So honestly, a sign or symptom could be anything that stands out to you to where it's noticeable that, Scott, you're not yourself.
Yeah, I've heard this said, like, if you see something, say something, right? Who do you say it to? Like,
so now I say it right to the person. If I know,
how do you do it?
You
man?
just say, "Are you going to hurt yourself?" I've noticed that you're not yourself. I'm concerned about you. Let's keep this between us, but I am worried about you. And sometimes people will break down and just be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not myself, or they'll continue to wear that mask and hide their emotions. And people are really good about that. People are really good about
nobody's better than cops at that.
Yeah.
Way.
Yep. 100%.
I mean, I've heard this said so many times. You know, you have to put on the hat. It's really easy to, you know, try and show empathy, but the reality of it is you're practiced at that. Like, you understand how to do that. You know what to say. It's almost rehearsed, because you get so many reps, you know, at doing it. So yeah, I mean, that's like, I guess what I'm saying is like having that conversation with somebody, man, that takes a lot of courage from both people to say that too. Because again, I'm in the kind of the camp maybe where it's like, fuck, if I say this, does this push them over the edge? Like, oh my God, he sees it. Like, I am that fucked up. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. But then you know that you can reach out to that person. You know that someone is recognizing that you're not okay and they care enough to say something.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I'm sure there's been so many times, and we have heard it before from people where it's like, I knew things were going south. I knew he was in a very dark place, but I never said anything. I didn't know how I should word it. I didn't know if I should approach him in privately or in public and joke about it. And then they kill themselves.
Wow.
And then you have to live with that forever and be like, I should have just asked him straight up. Like, are you going to kill yourself? Let's get some help. Or just drag the fucking person to the hospital and be like, I don't care. You're going to get help. Throw him in the car, lock it, whatever needs to be done to ensure that person's not going to kill himself. It is a heavy thing. And that's why this topic is not the most enjoyable topic. And this is a time where you may only have to deal with it once in your entire lifetime, but your conversation with that person is so important. And you need to be like spot on, or you're going to lose that person forever.
So you mentioned there's some, you know, basically like the out of the routine, kind of like this person just really is not themselves and kind of out of sorts, but also is kind of like that, I don't give a fuck kind of thing. Spending too much money, not working out anymore, showing up late, being out of uniform, just kind of being sloppy, maybe for lack of a better term. Is there anything else? Like, are there other things that people say or do that maybe for you now are obvious signs, but for the unsuspecting person, you know, like me, who may be a little bit unaware, what are some more things that I could be aware of?
Well, like a cry for help, like catching when people say certain type of things like, I don't care about this. I'm not going to be here anymore or much longer. Like if you could feel that anybody's like giving a cry out for help, like if you've ever had that experience before where it's like, hey, I'm struggling or I need help with this or anything that's the only really thing that I can think about right now off the top of my head is like another cry for help or anything that's out of the ordinary with that person that you can kind of catch on. But as far as the civilian side, like I don't really know.
Fair enough.
Because I just know like the military side of it and then the first responder side. But through civilian employment, I don't know that process of like who you even reach out to. Do you set up a Kaiser appointment? I don't know. And then like with first responders, we're so you're trained to wear a mask to hide your emotions.
That's what I was saying. Like, you put on that hat.
Yeah, you go to all these calls and
you're expected to be, they want you to be a human, but the reality of it is they also want you to be a robot and make zero fucking mistakes.
Yeah.
But you're a human being.
Yeah.
That's a tough dichotomy to live in on a day-to-day basis for 8, 10, 12 hours or whatever your shift is, and then go home and try and be a human being otherwise. Like,
on top of everything else that you have to deal with. Yeah, your home life and it's a lot, but I'm trying to think about like the civilian side of it as well, because you're not trained to wear a mask as a civilian, in my opinion. And I maybe you could touch on that, is if you were to have a civilian job and you were to need help, who would you go to?
Man, I for me, I'm fortunate. I mean, I have people in my life I feel like I could go to and have open conversations with, and feel safe in those conversations. But I also understand I'm very fortunate and blessed in that way, and not everybody has that. So I guess maybe my next question is like, what are the things not to do? Like, I mean, obviously, like, ignore it would be more than obvious, but are there ways to talk about this? Are there things to not say that could trigger or make exacerbate somebody's situation when you think there might be something going on, or there's something going on, or somebody's already asked for help, made that cry out, and they're in the process somewhere? Are there things that you can avoid, right? You just like, hey, it's better to handle it this way than that way, kind of thing. I mean, what light can you shed on that?
Yeah, honestly, I've never thought about it. I don't know. You just, I think the big thing is making sure that they know that you're there. You're there for them and anything that they need. And it might be, hey, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to take your guns from your house. I'm going to take whatever you can use as a tool to die by suicide and actually commit that like ideation. I'm going to take it away from you. You're not going to be by yourself. Because if you do get placed on a psychiatric hold for being a danger to yourself, obviously that gets put in your record.
That's a game changer, man.
If you go to purchase a firearm, negative, you're not getting one because it's in the background check. As a first responder or service member, if you carry a firearm, if you get placed on a psychiatric hold, they take all your guns. So that's a big... Yeah,
I mean, as a law enforcement officer, I can't imagine how... that's your identity.
What else are you going to do?
You got your badge and your gun. That's who you are. It's a part of who you are almost. It's not who you are, but it's a large portion of your identity is what I've been told.
Yeah, and you lose your identity, what do you have?
Right.
So
I sort of going back to the military piece, and you talked about the agencies having these resources, whether it's Kaiser or anything else for whatever, or these, peer counseling groups, or you have somebody that you can reach out to. The guys that are in the military, they don't have that. They don't have that. They're in a unit, they're in, and while things are maybe a little bit different now, we're not too far removed from this whole process where they're in the midst of things and they're dealing with this right now, and they have to continue to deal with it, and they have to get up the next day and deal with it again. They have to walk right back into that environment, right back into that war zone, right back into that place, time, whatever else. And they just simply don't have those resources, I guess. So they're struggling, right? And you have your own military experience and your own stuff that come from that. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit and how you dealt with that before you got to a place where you may have had more resources available to you and people were actually talking about it, at least to some extent, where, the way I understand it is it's just not cool. Like if you're in the military, you just, hey, fucking suck it up.
Yeah. And I'm in the Coast Guard now, and it's changing where we've been pretty open to talking about mental health, which is cool. But like back in the Marine Corps, I was never at combat. I was never in combat. I was infantry, but did one deployment to Japan, and it was just a training deployment, and that was it. But as a young Marine, you're in a fire team in a platoon, and you have your team leader. Your team leader is maybe like a E4 type thing.
What does that mean?
He's been in for a couple years, 4 or 5 years, just the rank structure. And then you get the higher level of leadership is the squad leader. And then there's that whole chain of command.
So you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old.
18, 19, 20. And then you go to this 20, 21-year-old and say, hey, I have this problem, which like you're really not going to do. Unfortunately, that's a stigma that's especially in the Marine Corps. I feel like it's a little bit different than other branches. So it's already the stigma there. And then it has to go from the team leader to the squad leader all the way up the chain of command. And then you're pretty much going to get kicked out of the military at that point if you are suicidal.
Because you're a risk.
Yep.
You're a liability at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, okay, let's go get you help and get you out. We don't need you anymore. You're kind of like a statistic at that point. And then the resources, they're in the bathrooms above the urinals. Once a year, you have to do a training course. And it's like sexual harassment, suicide prevention. And it's either online where you just like click through it, print out your certificate and hand it to your team leader or squad leader or whatever to ensure that you did the training and learned all about it, which is not true. Or it's a group setting where you have someone up in front of the class and they're going through this whole PowerPoint. So it's death by PowerPoint. Everybody's sitting in chairs on their phones. Right. And then as you're going through the presentation, there's a roster going around. You put your name, pass it down to the next person.
It's no wonder the suicide rate is so high, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically just writing you off.
Yeah.
Like whether you're in the system or you're not in the system at that point, you're sort of being written off. I don't think we can do enough for people that have come out of traumatic and stressful situations, particularly combat veterans, but it's not just there. There's other things that happen. And again, we're not taking into account anything that might have already been in that bucket or that backpack.
Yeah. Childhood trauma, anything. A lot of stuff that adults deal with trauma or ultimately dying by suicide stems from being triggered from childhood trauma, which isn't discussed because growing up as a child, whatever type of trauma it was, you think that that's normal until you get to the point in your life where
find out it's not.
Realize it's not normal.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
So going back to the Overwatch now and the things that you've learned, right? And you're still on the journey, you're still learning, and there are no perfect answers for this. And that's one of the other things that I've learned through this is, so we talked about like the Kaiser situation and the EAP and calling the hotline and those kind of things. And sometimes that can be helpful. And a lot of times it's not helpful at all. It just makes the situation worse. And I am a firm believer in the fact that sometimes it has to get a little bit worse before it's going to get better. And I think, in life, we learn these things. Like you have to suffer a little bit sometimes to learn from those situations. But we're talking about something that's dire. So what are the things that you're learning from the people that you're having on the show, the people that you deal with on a regular basis, or what the Overwatch is being able to do for people that's maybe a little bit different or gives them different outlets or avenues than what you may have we've just spent the last 15 minutes sort of describing? Yeah.
And that's a huge thing, is giving people outlets and giving people the resources that we talk about. So we started the buddy program. I know you've mentioned on a couple episodes.
Talk about
Renee's a part of it.
Yeah, talk about the details there.
Yeah. So that's something that we came up with, kind of, and it stems all going back from that paramedic with the child boiling, where it went to therapy, and the therapist was like, "Holy fuck! This is what you
What
see.
do I do with you?"
Yeah. So when you get a first responder, a veteran, or a civilian, you want to go to someone that can relate to you. Right. So we came up with, we just called it the buddy program, or as of now, I think we have 19 people, has a photo of them, their email and a bio. And it's like, hey, I'll use my mom, for example. She's on there. My name's Donna. Been married to Mike. He's been a first responder, veteran for this long. He's been on multiple deployments. We've had a healthy marriage. I also have 2 sons that are first responders.
That's a lot. That's a fucking resume and a half.
Yeah, she's a saint.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, man, that's a resume and a half.
Yeah, she's a saint. We put her through a lot of shit.
I mean, I've not met her yet. Sometimes we do a little back and forth on Instagram.
Yeah.
She seems like a really sweet lady, but she sounds tough as fucking nails.
Yeah, she is. She's been put through multiple deployments with my dad, my brother, getting surrounded in fires and on call outs, foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits, SWAT call outs, you name it. So the buddy program, it's kind of stuff like that. So a spouse of a first responder or a veteran can go on there and be like, hey, Donna's had her husband on multiple deployments. They still have a healthy relationship. Let me reach out to her and be like, hey, what are some tips? What are some of the struggles that you guys went through? How can I work through this? And that's all it is. It's a resource. It's between that person that's reaching out and that buddy.
It's very private.
It's via email. It's completely anonymous. We don't even hear about it unless one of the buddies is like, hey, I had someone reach out, and they don't even say the name or anything. So completely anonymous. It's totally free, and it's all these volunteers that have been through traumatic situations. Or, I mean, shoot, one's a firefighter and he was an alcoholic and he's recovered from it. So if you're a first responder and you're having a drinking problem and you're seeing a rise in your intake of alcohol, you can go on there and be like, okay, cool, alcohol, he recovered from it. Boom. How did you do this? Can you please give me some tips? I don't want to go to my supervisor.
I don't want to send up any red flags up the pole yet. I'm recognizing I'm having an issue, and I just feel like I need somebody to talk to, but I don't feel like I can do it this way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, and that's the whole thing that we kind of been talking about here. It's the awareness for it, and then it's also the availability of the resources. So it's having the resource there 24/7 for the person. And then it's also the trusting and completely anonymous. So that is what, in our opinion, and that's why we started, is going to get people talking.
How many people do you guys have reaching out? I mean, you said it's pretty anonymous, but can you give some?
Yeah, we've had like 7 to 10.
Okay.
So not too many, but one, they get coffee every other week. They're first responders.
They just have like a coffee chat.
They have a coffee chat every other week. So it's super cool. So, and we get updates every once in a while and be like, hey, still everything's going good. Coffee this week. And it's like, cool. That's all we want to hear. We don't want any praise, anything. It's just, it's cool to actually be able to help. And that's the whole goal of it. It's helping one person. That's all we care about.
Gotcha. I mean, so when somebody goes maybe through this process with you, and then you're able to provide them some other type of support. So you mentioned basically like this scholarship program. What does that look like? So, because again, there's the insurance system, right? And there's the Kaiser system, but what does it look like if they go through? Well, I guess the question is like, what are you scholarshiping? What do they get?
Yeah. So it's, and each person, our board of directors talks about it. And then we vote yes or no, we'll financially help this person. And we do have a criteria. If it's like hey, I'm really in a financially tough place right now, where we have a contract set up for each person. So they have to sign a contract saying that we're assisting them financially. Mm-hmm. And then if things are really bad financially, they need to provide us with like some bank statements and stuff, and then we'll help them further.
That's gotta be a tough deal for you guys on the board. Yeah.
So it's like it really is a full-time job, but it's cool that we've already had what are we working on? 9 people. And now we're working on 3 first responders, and 1 went through that EAP program. Didn't work out. Kaiser, they were all on strike, so they weren't even taking appointments, and then came to us. And within 2 hours, we had this gentleman set up with a therapist and a phone call 2 hours after that. He's on vacation right now. When he gets back from vacation, they're going to set it up. So if anybody needs financial assistance with therapy, and that's where all of our funds come from. So from grant writing, we have a grant writer that we pay. The fundraiser, the donations, anything. So
this is all these would be like private therapists.
Yep. So it's their choosing.
They're not connected.
And then we reach out to the therapist. So Destiny, you're going to have her on September 23rd.
Yeah, Destiny's coming on. Yeah, 23rd, just before the fundraiser.
Yeah, event. So super excited to have her up. She's amazing. So she works with first responder couples.
She also works with teens. I learned that when I talked to her. So like her real focus is first responders. She has a connection there, but she also works with teens, which I gotta be honest, like, so my my oldest went through the teenage period. I went through the teenage period. Like, I know how difficult that is. I can't think of much more difficult type of clientele to be working with. I'm really encouraged to have her on and kind of pick her brain a little bit. She does some very specific therapy, the EMDR therapy, which is become a little bit more sort of mainstream as of late. She'll be talking about that a little bit. I have a lot of questions there. But that also brings me to the next question, which is, we've talked a little bit about some of what people might think is more like the typical, you got to go see a therapist, or, you got to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And they do very different things. One can prescribe medication, one doesn't prescribe medication. But without going too deep into that, like, there are lots of different things that can help people. There is no one way. This isn't a cookie cutter approach. And I think a lot of times that cookie cutter approach is applied to the masses rather than, and a lot of it has to do with awareness, but most of it has to do with money at the end of the day. Like, what is my insurance going to pay for? Because it's not cheap. It becomes very expensive. I am a huge advocate for, look, man, whatever fucking helps this person, that's what we need to give them. Whatever gets them to step back from the ledge, to reevaluate, to open up, to start to talk about this stuff and get into a process of healing rather than a process of managing, the demons, if you will. Yeah. I'm all for it. And that seems to be there seems to be a massive, huge gap there. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. And it's, so usually like first responders, you go through the EAP program and you may get 5 or 7 therapy sessions with Kaiser covered. And that's just like getting to introduce yourself. You got to build a connection and a rapport with that therapist and vice versa.
And hopefully a therapist that can help you.
If you get matched up with some.
We've already covered this.
Yeah.
Because there is a little bit, I can almost relate this a little bit to fitness, right? Because that's kind of my background, personal trainers or even physical therapists or whatever. I'm not a physical therapist, but you need to have somebody on your team that you can relate to, that you feel comfortable with, that understands you, that you can the most important thing that can happen or needs to happen first is there has to be a connection. I have to feel comfortable with this person. I have to feel confident with this person, and I have to feel like this person has a solutions-based process for me to go through. And if those first two things, the trust and the connection happen, then I'll be that much more open to the process and sticking to the process, because then the next thing that has to happen is a commitment and a consistency to the process so that we learn over time what works for this individual. If you're dealing with, the therapist decided to go on strike, and there's a bigger agenda beyond your problem that you're trying to deal with, obviously that's problematic. Have you talked to people? And I know, again, Destiny's one of those people that takes a little bit of a different approach. She has a cash-based business. She's a private person, a private practitioner. And most of the people we send people to at Red Dot Fitness that need specific help have already been through the system, right? They need to go see somebody that isn't limited by the system. They are going to apply different things based on their knowledge, their wisdom, and or refer out or work with other people that can apply different skill sets, different levels of knowledge and wisdom to that entire process. So it almost takes like a team or a village. I don't know. Have you had experience with anybody that's kind of come through the Overwatch, or just people in your professional or personal, experience that have found remedies or found the right answer way outside the more conventional way? No.
It's pretty much just the conventional way of going to therapy, going through the program. And it's kind of like, hey, this is the one-way road. There's no right turn to lead you to this way or the alternative routes. It's, as of now, it's kind of just primarily one way. These are the steps. If you don't follow them, then
you got to be on the program.
That's it. You're on the program. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's hugely problematic. I find it very aggravating, particularly with what we know, particularly from the human perspective, with all the things that are out there, whether that's alternative somatic type therapy, or again, I mentioned the EMDR therapy, or maybe alternative medicine type therapies. I find it hugely problematic that we're not exploring that more and giving more credit to that, because I do know people that have gone through that weren't law enforcement or military or first responders, again, that just kind of in general, that have gone through all different types of things that have really helped them get to the other side. And they're just not available if you are an employee of the state, employee of the county, employee federally, again, if you're in the military or some other, alphabet, type situation.
Yeah. And it's like a checklist. It's like you call for help, and are you one of these? No. Are you one of the, okay, I'm going to refer you to this person. And you're like, all I'm trying to do is get help here, so that makes it super frustrating, and going back to the availability of the resources. So, and back to we were talking about the cost of therapy. It ranges from $150 an hour to $200 an hour. So you get a first responder, or anybody for that matter, into the first 5 to 7 sessions, whatever's covered by their employer. And then, hey, this next session, I need $150 for this hour.
Then it's coming out of pocket.
That's coming out of pocket. And you're just getting into maybe the meat and potatoes.
Right.
And then with each therapy, there's homework that's in between that you have to do, whether it's writing stuff, recording your voice, any type of homework that the therapist might give you, because you're only checking in once a week, but there's still stuff that you could do to improve yourself in between that time period. So, and that's where we come into play, where it's like, hey, after the first 5 or 7, or if you don't even want to go through the EAP program and everybody's tracking that you're in a dark place and that you're going to therapy and be stigmatized and you have a flag on you, then we'll financially assist that person.
Gotcha. I mean, I don't know why there's not more talk about this, and maybe there is. It's just kind of undercover. I haven't found it, or I haven't discovered it yet. What I do know is the people that have reached out and basically said more people need to be talking about this. Thank you for bringing this to the table. And I know, and again, that's largely in part to kind of what you guys are doing, you and Jesse are doing, and your team, your crew, the whole crew there. I know you kind of brought some things to the table that you kind of wanted to talk about tonight, just with regard to this topic in general. And I remember maybe we should just go down that checklist and kind of cover some of those things that we may not have already touched on.
Yeah. And I wish I had more time, because so busy as we talk about having so much on your plate. So with my shitty handwriting here, I finally wrote down some stuff. Let's talk about guilt of attempts. So attempting to die by suicide and not being successful. So imagine, and listeners, imagine being in such a dark place and not having any resources and not having a healthy coping mechanism, feeling like you have no way out. The world's going to be better off without me. I'm useless. Whatever you may say, to kind of convince yourself that you're better off dead than alive. You make an attempt. Let's use hanging, for example. You get electrical cord, you get a rope, and you try to hang yourself. And something that Tim, our guest speaker, happened to him. He tried to hang himself in his garage of his residence, and his wife walked in. Wife walked in and was like, "What are you doing?" And then after a minute, he took the rope off. So personally, I know someone that I went to high school with who attempted suicide via hanging, and obviously unsuccessful. He's still alive. However, he has a scar around his neck of a rope.
For the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life.
So you got to walk around and explain that.
And how are you going to hide that? And how are you going to recover from that emotionally? Like, how are you supposed to go?
You have to look at it every single day.
You go to brush your teeth in the morning and you're going to look at the rope and you're going to constantly be reminded that. You try to go on a date with someone and it's going to be like, "Oh, what's that around your neck?" So
some of this trauma is invisible, so to speak, right? Like there are experiences that you've lived, but other stuff is literally physical. I mean, you've shot yourself, or you've been shot, or, I mean, those are just two those might be really lame examples.
No. It's not.
I don't even know.
And that's invisible. That is invisible, because there are people out there where they've had guns in their mouths and then someone comes in the room and takes it away, or they've pulled the trigger and there's no round in the chamber, or it's a dead, and it's like you got lucky on that one and that was your sign, like, okay, I'm not meant to die. So that's a perfect example of an invisible.
So what do you do? Like, how do you handle that situation as somebody that's trying to be supportive, or as that person that's done that? I mean, how's this guy dealing with that?
I don't know. I don't talk to him much. I saw him at the gym, and that's when I found out about it, because he told me about it. And I am sure that it takes a lot of therapy and conversation about it to accept that. And I'm sure that you have to take that as a huge sign that you are meant to be in this world and that you're not meant to die.
That's heavy, man.
Yeah. So I never even thought about discussing the guilt of attempting suicide until a couple days ago when you called and said, let's do this. And I started reaching out to people. So someone brought that up. Do you have any opinions on that or anything?
God, man. I guess this is why it's so hard, man. Cause I guess if I've not been in this situation, so I can only speculate and try and understand what it must feel like to have to go through that every day and looking at it and having to deal with it and feeling it. But I guess what I would want, this is, again, purely speculation, is that people just treated me with kindness and some level of decency, and that it isn't who I am. It's something that I went through, and every day I have to live with this. And that doesn't mean I'm messed up. It just means this is something that I've dealt with. Again, it's a visible scar. So it maybe, I don't know if I'm on the other side though, looking at it, maybe I'm treating this people with, or I'm handling this person with like kid gloves. But I'm sure if you're that person, like, you don't want to be handled with kid gloves. You want to be treated. The correct word is not normal. That's wrong. I know that. So I don't know how to really respond to that.
And for me, I would think it's like, hey, you went through that. You made an attempt. You obviously went through a dark time, but you can accomplish anything now. Like, I would try to spin that into a positive and say, hey, this is your reminder to know that you can get through anything. Like,
yeah. So I've heard this actually is like, you had an opportunity to reinvent yourself, and you're doing that now.
Yeah.
So
like, start fresh,
right.
Reset yourself, whatever you were going through, like, work on it with someone. But clearly this was an attempt on your life, which failed for a reason. Now make it worth it. That's what I would try to do personally. I try to make it into a positive.
That's insightful.
And I'm sure there are times where if someone has a visible injury of a suicide attempt and people tiptoe around it, or maybe that person is not really discussed it that much with their therapist, or they're not that comfortable, where someone says something and they get triggered and they're like, okay, back down that emotional roller coaster. Here's more momentum. And then they make another attempt. So, and that's something that Tim's going to talk about at the fundraiser, because he made 3 attempts on his life.
3. God.
So you want to talk about really, like, you should be fucking alive. Like, right. You're 0 for 3, dude. You are meant to be alive in this world.
That's a really good point.
Having been on our episode, and then he's been on over like 50 episodes in the past year, or 50 podcasts. And he's talking to people all over the country. You name it. And obviously he's flying out from the East Coast to come to us to hit another audience in the West Coast just to share his story. So now he's taking it like, I went through all these dark times. I crashed my car. I didn't remember because I was an alcoholic. I took too many pills. I didn't want to wake up. And then the next day I felt like absolute shit. I was like, you know what? I looked in the mirror and I was like, fuck this. I'm never doing this again. Fast forward, tries to hang himself. Never going to do this again. And now he's impacting so many lives.
It's pretty courageous, man.
Yeah.
I mean, some might find offense in me saying that, or even like that's heroic, but at the same time, I don't think it is. I think it's one of those things where you realize Like, this is what you were put here for. You didn't expect it. You're not, this isn't what you plan to do, but you take what you got and you run with it. Yeah, God. Dang,
yeah. And then you use your story to change lives.
Yep.
Right. So our motto is one more is one less.
Right.
So like for Tim being able to come on our podcast to share a story, to come to the event in front of 125, 150 strangers to talk about how he attempted to take his life 3 times and his alcohol addiction and his failed relationship with his daughter, which took months and months to recover, even after going through a 30-day like AA retreat, is the impact that he has on other people now.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody's listening, you've ever made an attempt on your life or anything, turn it into a positive. We can connect you with Tim. And that's the cool thing too, is about all the podcasts and everything. Everybody's a resource. So everybody that we have on, and I'm sure same with you, Scott, is everybody just like, that's why we always say like the community is so amazing. Yep. So, yeah, it'll be really cool to hear him talk about it. And it'll be an emotional roller coaster for sure during that fundraiser, because we're going to have 2 people talk about
That's got to be that for him too, man. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I have to imagine, I'm just being real about this. I have to imagine that when you're not successful at this, there has to be a, like, wow, I'm that big of a failure.
Yep. That's exactly what I was just thinking in my head. You're like, God, I failed at my relationship. Right. I lost my kids, just for example. I tried to kill myself and I failed that. You're like, why can't I do anything?
Where does that take you? Oh, wow.
So, and I feel with this topic with suicide, I absolutely hate suicide because it's the unknown, right? Because
What do you mean? What do you mean?
You have so many times we hear stories and events of people dying by suicide where it was completely out of the woodworks.
You know what? That's interesting. You said that. I literally just had a conversation with an officer last night who's really struggling right now with a lot of things based on cumulative stuff. And there was, a couple of very, very specific incidences. One, as of late in the last year that really, really challenged him. And he was just telling me, like, there was a high ranking, officer in their department that took his own life just only a few months ago. And what he said to me is, like, if you asked anybody, any officer, anybody in the administration, anybody who you thought might do something like that, that person would have been the absolute last person you would have ever thought.
That's the mask.
Yeah, man.
That is the mask. That is literally the mask. Every time all these veterans, all these first responders, these civilians that are macho, I got to look like I'm
fine.
Yep. I know you hate that word. I know you hate that word.
Yeah.
And a majority of the time, because of the stigma and they don't want to say anything, they are just dying by suicide. And I hear it all the time and I hate it because family members are so shocked. Friends are so shocked. Coworkers, like you just said, we never would have imagined this person to do it.
Yeah. Completely taken off guard. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, how as a community did we fail this person to not even make an attempt to ensure that they're like, where were the resources? Where was the cry for help?
Yeah. So that's a whole other side of it, is the aftermath of this for the people that are close to or involved with that person, like them being a failure. Like, how did I not see this coming? Mm-hmm. And how do they deal with that? I mean, I know you've had people on who have had spouses that have committed suicide or, failed attempts or whatever. How do they cope? Where do they go? What do they deal? Or where do they deal with these things? Where are their outlets?
Yeah, and so we're having Sarah Wilkinson on prior to the fundraiser. Excuse me, and her husband was a U.S. Navy SEAL, and then out of the blue died by suicide. So, it was I'll think of Alexis. Her father was a U.S. Marine, and he killed himself, and it was out of the blue, and then they have to live the rest of their life knowing like, hey, how did I not catch this? And that happens all the time. And it's a huge problem. And I think the spouses that go through that take it more seriously. And that's when we start seeing organizations come up like the Iverson Foundation.
Yep.
So Ashley Iverson, amazing woman. Her husband, Corey, died in the Thomas fire as Cal Fire. I think Pranay might have touched on that.
I think you did, yeah.
Corey unfortunately died during that fire, and she was like, let's shed light into darkness. Let's talk about suicide. And now she's bringing all these amazing things, all these amazing resources for the community. So that's what I see them doing. The spouses, they're not like, I'm going to sit here and dread on this forever. They're taking it like, okay, I'm going to like obviously remember him or her, but I'm going to make a difference.
Let's try to make a difference.
Yeah. Because they don't want anybody to ever feel that way that they felt. Equally
as courageous.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else you got there on that list, man?
I got a lot of stuff. So this kind of goes for, I think for everybody, the civilian side, the first responder side, and the military side is your command or your superiors, like the experiences that they've been through, and how you relate that to the trauma that you have experienced.
Talk about this. Explain this to me.
Yeah. So, for example, a lot of service members after their time in the military, they become police officers or firefighters, right? So we use firefighters, for example. We haven't used them. The heroes. Every cop wants to be a firefighter. They get to work out on duty, wash their truck.
Some of my best friends are like, dude, should have been a firefighter.
Dude, yeah, I'm so jealous of my brother, man. I'm so jealous. His truck's always clean and mine's fucking filthy right now. So
they're good at cleaning shit, that's for sure.
They are really good. So are military members, actually, like bona fide janitors. So you say you have someone that was in a combat veteran, let's say, right? And they've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, Fallujah, and they've lost so many people. Maybe they were injured in combat, and then they go and become a firefighter.
So that's a lot of stuff, man. They're bringing a lot of stuff to the table, a lot of life experience.
Yep. And then that, which is totally behind the scenes, also affects the firefighter that was never in the military that is kind of coming into this new career.
What do you mean? Like, how do you mean? So you've got...
With no military experience, no real trauma.
Got it.
So they come in fresh, 18, 19 years old.
Great childhood, whatever else. Yeah. They did all the right things. They were the explorer or whatever the hell it is for firefighters.
And maybe the only deceased person that they've seen is their grandma or grandpa in a coffin. And you have this service member that is now a firefighter that has seen legs, arms, everything blown off.
Yeah.
All this crazy stuff that our combat veterans see. And obviously you become a family and you understand, you hear all these stories. And so say you were this combat veteran, you've seen all these crazy things. You've lost X amount of people in combat. You've lost more to suicide upon return. And then I'm a probie, I'm a year on, and I just went to my first SIDS death, my first child death. And then after that, I went to a fatality traffic collision with 2 kids in it. A whole family is dead, right?
Yeah.
And it's affecting me. But I think about all the trauma that you've been through.
You know the other stories.
Yeah, and I'm like, dude, he's been through way more than me. Like my stuff doesn't even relate to him.
Yeah, it's not even
so
close.
I'm not going to bring it up. He's going to judge me, or like my trauma isn't valid.
Or maybe he doesn't judge you, but you're judging yourself.
And then you just snap one day. So, and that's the same thing. Everybody, the backpack, you fill in the backpack, and you don't want to talk about it because people are going to judge you. And then your backpack breaks. So that's kind of the common one. But that's a huge thing in our community. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't know, but in the civilian sector as well, I'm going to go ahead and say the same thing, where you're not validating your trauma based on yourself. You're taking your trauma and comparing it to someone else.
I guess that could be, you know what? I'm probably guilty of that. I mean, I've been through my own issues in my life. Yeah. Because I got you talking too much. Get that thing lit. I've been through my own stuff, man. And I've had my own I've seen several therapists over my years, and some were very helpful and some weren't. What I had been doing was basically filling up my backpack. We keep using this backpack analogy, and for those that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, Nick McCarthy described it as, when you come on when you become a police officer, you start with the backpack and it's empty. It really isn't, but with regard to your career as a police officer and all the incidents, all the things, all the micro traumas and all the major traumas and the major incidents that you have, you keep taking they're rocks and you keep you put them in the backpack. You just like, hey, I got to move on to the next thing. Sometimes inside the same shift, you see those things that you just mentioned, God forbid, the boiling baby or the traffic accident with the dead family and the kids or the infant deaths and those kind of things. And you just go, hey, I got to move on. I got to go to the next, I got to come to work tomorrow. And you keep filling up that backpack with those rocks. But pretty soon that backpack's over full and it can't handle that load anymore. There's just no more room. You keep stuffing it in there. And then something happens where that backpack breaks. And then all those rocks come out and you got this huge mess sitting in front of you. And there's no place to put all those rocks. There's no place to put all those stones, and things happen. Things manifest.
Yeah. And then at that point, if your backpack's broken and you go to therapy, your therapist is not going to begin with that incident.
Oh, and by the way, those rocks never go away.
Yeah.
They're your rocks, man.
You got to start 4 or 5 years ago, and
you got to just learn where to put the rocks now.
Yeah. And your 5 or 7 therapy sessions. Oh, time's up. We only got 2 years into your career.
So I had my own backpack. It was in a different situation. And because I saw, and I guess I recognized people in my life, relationships had their own backpack, I decided that my backpack wasn't that heavy. Like, it's just like this person has a way heavier backpack than me. They have way more rocks in their pack. And I just need to maybe on occasion take one of their rocks and put it in my pack. Right. And I can do this. I can shoulder this load. I can handle it. It's not something that I can't deal with. I'm tough. I'll suck it up. It's fine. Which is why I hate the word fine. And that's what I realized. And when you go through this stuff, what you realize is fuck, there were all these red flags, there were all these things that happened and I ignored them or I pretended that they weren't there. And I shouldered stuff I shouldn't have been shouldering it. And as a result, it's impacted me, but it's also impacted other people, other things. I might have, there were certainly behaviors I was engaging in that weren't healthy and, thoughts that weren't healthy and, all kinds of stuff, right, that come up. And that's from, again, the quote unquote civilian side of things. So I think I get where you're coming from there. And that is my backpack isn't as heavy as the other person's backpack. So I just need to shut the fuck up and I need to get to work and not worry about it. And I think what you're saying is the danger in that is, dude, but that's your backpack. And don't compare your backpack to somebody else's because they're not the same.
Yeah. And I think every person, honestly, and I don't know if this would reduce the number of suicides or what, but like I said, I think about it every day because I'm super passionate about this. And I don't want to continue to lose friends or just good people to suicide when there's so much out there. There's so many resources. There's people that want to help them. Where it's like, write down the stuff that you've kind of been through and tackle that one at a time.
Right.
Fuck everyone else.
Right.
Like,
don't dismiss it.
Don't dismiss it at all. Don't let your backpack get to the point where it's even half full. Try to do that and keep that as a goal for yourself. Mm-hmm. It does become way more difficult as a first responder if you're in the military because your backpack could be full after 1 week of being on service.
Right.
But it's also the resources that are there too. And it's the critical incident debriefs. And are you familiar with critical incident debriefs? Or
I've only heard the term and it's kind of been touched on, but no, maybe you can explain it.
Yeah. So I've been through 2 in my career and I hit 8 years in December and I probably should have been through 200.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
how do you come up with that?
Just all the calls. One of my first calls for service was a suicide via gunshot to the head. Just a single gunshot from the house, perimeter set up around the house, make calls into the residence, end up going to search it, and then find the person deceased on the ground with a head or a pillow underneath her head. And then it was my job to take photographs, collect the gun, clear the gun, take pictures of the suicide note, and then collect the bullet from her hair.
Jeez, that's heavy, man.
No critical incident debrief. So
that's just your day.
That was just the start of the day. And it was like, cool. Your partner's got the crime scene log. The coroner's going to come. This is what you need to do. Let's go get this paperwork, book the gun, do everything, right? Next call. So a critical incident debrief is, it's kind of just like what it sounds, but I'll go into it. So it's any critical incident, you're going to debrief it. So if you go to a major call for service where it doesn't turn out well.
That sounds broad, man.
Yeah. So I'll use my first one as an example. I was working driving under the influence saturation car one night, Friday night with my buddy. All we were doing was looking for DUI drivers.
Okay.
People that were intoxicated and driving. It was a grant from the state of California to get more people out there enforcing and trying to get drunk drivers off the streets. A call for service comes out approximately 2 blocks away, and it was a domestic violence related call. My buddy and I, not even working a beat, an area, we're 2 blocks away, and we're like, dude, we gotta go. So we go and we hear a female screaming inside. So we go inside, and there's her boyfriend on top of her on the bed, beating her in the face with a wine bottle. And ultimately couldn't even, when fire came in, they couldn't get anything to help her breathe, an oxygen mask, anything. She was that fucked up. They didn't know if it was male or female based on the face. It was that bad. So they throw her in the ambulance. They take her to the major trauma hospital in the area. And then me and my buddy that were just working this saturation car had to stay with the body in this private room. Yeah, she's dead, just laying there in this private room with the curtains closed. Had to wait for the coroner to come out, take pictures of the body.
Because you can't leave her by herself.
Can't leave her by herself. No critical incident debrief. So then it was just like, type the report and then you go on. Whereas a critical incident debrief is, or actually, scratch that, rewind 10 seconds. We did have a critical incident debrief for that one. So 2 days later, we had...
What was that like?
So it was at a fire station. We had the firefighters that responded to that call. We had the medics that responded to that call. And then it was the dispatchers and us, the police officers. And we had a therapist come in, and it was on our days off, and we got overtime to come in and do it. So it wasn't like on our free time. And we kind of just broke down the call, and they were like, hey, like, Scott, what were you doing at this time of call? Like, what did you see? And walk me through it. Next person, Greg. Oh, we were at the firehouse. We were doing XYZ, and this is what we got the call. And then they talk about, how are you feeling now?
It's kind of purging the valve.
Yeah, purging the valve and getting you to talk about it. And it was really good that we did that, because you get to talk about it and you're there for each other if you need anything. And then you can always kind of check on each other after that. And then there were further resources available. And so that's like a critical incident debrief. Sometimes it's like, it could be as small as bringing the entire team in after a call for service into like your briefing room or your back lot where all the patrol cars are, or the firehouse, and be like, hey, how's everyone doing? You guys good? Good. Do you need anything? If you need anything, I'll be in my office for the next 30 minutes. Come in, no questions asked, whatever you need. That could be a critical incident debrief, or it could be the big drawn out thing.
So there's no standardized process for this.
No.
And this is who leads this, or who commands this? Like who sets this up? Like, hey, so we're all meeting back here at this time.
So it's up to the supervisor more than likely, because you're really not, and there's not much awareness of it, right? So you're not really.
There's a million other things I'm sure that's going on. Right?
Yeah, you have so much shit to do. You have so much shit to do after these critical incidents that people just want to get things done. They're like, I got to do this. I got to go, boom, I got to type my report. I need to review my body cam footage. I need XYZ, right? And it's so hard to be like, hey, let's take 20 minutes and sit down. Like, we're out of service for the next 20, 30 minutes. Let's just talk. So
give me an example of a time where this didn't happen and it impacted you.
So I'm on the, I ride the motorcycle for work part-time, which comes along with being on call for the major injury.
Is this motor pool?
Like
you're on traffic?
Yeah, traffic detail. So I have my own motorcycle. So I'm an alternate motorcycle officer. So if we have enough people in beats and districts, I get to ride the motorcycle and I take all the traffic collisions. and then do traffic enforcement in the area. With that comes
You're the guy everybody hates that day.
Yeah, I'm the guy that if you're going 26 and a 25, you're fucked. No, I'm actually pretty cool. If you're cool to me, I'm cool. I really don't care. So with that comes being on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for any major traffic collision, fatality, basically.
You have to go do investigation.
Yeah. If it's a fatality on scene or if it's has potential to become a fatality. So like an old lady, vehicle versus pedestrian gets hits her head, she goes through a trauma. There's potential that she's going to die. We get called out and then the scene gets locked down. So you basically show up and then you have this scene and you got blood everywhere. You got shoes. Every motorcycle collision, their shoes fall off. It's the weirdest thing. No matter if they have boots, their shoes fall off. Been on one where the helmet has flown off, blood streaming down. So I've had a couple of those that affected me and nothing ever came from it. No one buddy checks each other to see like, hey, how are you doing?
It's just the job.
It's just the job. Yeah.
What do you say when people say, hey, dude, well, that's what you signed up for?
I say, no, it's not. It's not what I signed up for. I signed up to obviously help people and do the job, but I didn't sign up to take on all these traumatic incidences and throw rocks into my backpack. I didn't sign up for that part.
Because that wasn't in the
job description.
Well, yeah, it's not in the job description. It's also not in the recruiting brochure.
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, by the way, Greg, you're going to respond to an incident at least once a week or whatever. I have no idea what the frequency is, but you're going to see stuff pretty regularly that's probably going to live in your brain and live in your soul for could be the rest of your life. And just want you to know that that's part of the deal. And sometimes we might talk about this and sometimes we might not talk about it. There could be resources for you. You may have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to get somebody to talk to if it's really bothering you. None of that stuff is ever talked about.
Yeah, no, not at all. So I think we need more of that because if we do that, that's going to reduce the number of rocks in your backpack, which is going to reduce the number of our people in our community, their backpack breaking. Like, let's try to do whatever we can to not get people's backpacks to break, you know? So.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Ready for the next one?
I'm ready for the next one, man.
I don't know how much I have left on here.
I love where this is going, man. Keep it up.
We talked about it before we started recording, but it was suicide being selfish.
Let's talk about it.
So I know we already kind of mentioned it, but when we talked on the phone a couple of days ago, I put it up on our story where I was like, hey, we're going to do an episode on Suicide Awareness Month. Suicide Prevention Week is this week. And I've heard this a lot before, but I didn't really start like kind of understanding it or thinking about it or discussing it until we started the nonprofit and podcast. So
you mean people saying that, oh, this person committed suicide? What a selfish act that was.
Yes.
They were only thinking of themselves and not the aftermath that they were going to leave behind and all the people that they were going to impact.
Exactly. So that's been a common theme that I've seen a lot. When I posted that, there were a couple people that said selfish. How do you perceive suicide? Selfish, selfish, selfish. The other ones, it was like a heartbreak for all, an everlasting depression. We'll never forget that person, anything. But there were a couple selfish ones, and I posted one, and so many people were like, this is not the way to go about it. That's only making the stigma of suicide worse by talking about how dying by suicide is selfish.
So I recently listened to a story, a highly respected podcast that I listen to on a regular basis. There was a firefighter, had a very long career, wrestled with a lot of things. Was on several units where he was doing a lot of recoveries of these were not rescues, these were recoveries, and the things that kind of added up amongst all the other life trauma that he had and things like that. And he attempted to take a bunch of medication and take his own life. And he'd done this in a location that he was familiar with, but he wasn't thinking about. He was just like, I don't want to do this at home. I don't want somebody to find me there. That's like, it's the home. Like, I don't want that to be the thing. So I'm going to go somewhere else. But the things that he realized afterwards, because he was not successful, obviously, because he's telling the story, was that two things. Well, there were several, but one was that the person in his life, like his partner in his life, like his life partner's girlfriend at the time, was still around actually after all this, was going to get that call, and that she was going to have to deal with that. But one of the things that messed him up the worst in terms of the selfishness piece that we're talking about here was that one thing he never considered was that where he went to attempt this act, the firehouse that he actually worked at had to responded to the call. And they had to show up, and those were the people that had to work on him.
Yeah. And
then he had to face those people again, and he never considered that. And the guilt that he had to deal with after that, and obviously he's working through all this now, but the guilt that he had to deal with that was tremendous. And that he was written off by many, many of those people that he had effectively been in command of, and been mentors to, and they just stopped talking to him.
Because he put them through that trauma.
Right?
Yeah.
And so going back to the selfish piece, I think I can kind of understand from the outside looking in where people would say that. And if I'm being honest, man, I guess, I mean, if I'm being really transparent, I mean, I think there's probably been times in my life where I've read a story or heard a story where I may have even thought the same thing. So what you're saying is like, I don't know, like that's a tough one to wrestle with, because if you're not taking into account what you could be construed as, you're just so self-absorbed, you're just being so disconnected from all the other things that are around you, that I think it could be very easily construed as selfish by somebody. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong either. What you're saying is that is something that needs to change in terms of people's perception of it, because they've gotten to such a dark place that and reached a level of darkness where they don't think there's another answer. And it doesn't really even have anything to do with being self-absorbed. It's a lot of times about stopping the pain and just ending whatever it is that they're going through. And that everybody will be better off because they're being a burden in some way, or they're risking other people. And, you know, in some cases, depending on your profession, you could be risking other people's safety, and you know it, and you're going to work every day knowing that. And I don't know. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. And I can kind of go both ways with it. And I don't want anybody to be like, hey, you said it was selfish, or you said it was not selfish, or anything.
I struggle with it. I'm just being honest. Yeah.
No. And this is like struggling with discussing suicide being selfish. Like, when have you ever heard a discussion like this? I've never discussed it at all. So I think exactly like what we're doing here, and you coming up with the idea to talk about this and everything, number one, is a step in the right direction. So I don't want it to come across the way where I'm saying suicide is selfish or not. Because in my opinion, whether it affects the stigma or not, sometimes I do feel like it is selfish. And I feel like it's selfish on both parts, where it's the actual individual who's considering and having those suicidal ideations, but it's also selfish on the community for not providing those resources, not talking about it.
Or not being compassionate.
Or not being compassionate. Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's a double-edged sword there. This is a fucking tough one to talk about.
It's really tough.
And I'm curious to hear people's opinions and everything. So I hope.
Me too. I'm very open to it. Yeah. I just, again, I'm just looking at it going, and this, again, I've already disclosed, I've not had to go through this, so I don't know. I know people that have considered it.
Yeah.
And I've talked to them, in depth about it, but I have to be honest, and now that we're talking about it, I have some people very close to me in my life that have had to go through do a lot of work to come out to the other side to where they are now. And I'm happy to say they're doing great, but never once did it cross my mind that they were being selfish for having those feelings. But I could get where somebody's feeling so much sorrow and so much angst and so much like, how come I didn't see this and whatever else? There's so many other things that could come up. where they could feel like that. But at the same time, it's like, it's not about you, man. Like, it's about this person was hurting that bad that they felt, can you just put that aside for a second and kind of deal with it, you know, and try to put yourself in their shoes, which obviously you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
I don't think there's anything that you can do to put yourself in someone's shoes that is actually like at the lowest point of that roller coaster in the darkest time of their life. I don't think you can relate to it.
I'm sure there's, you know, if you're a therapist out there, you've been through some coursework or some classes and done some clinical work or whatever, where you've been, I guess, tuned into to kind of this whole thing. And I'm hoping to learn more about it. But yeah, man. So I guess what I hear you saying is like, it's something we need to think about and consider just as humans and going down this path. Like, if you know somebody or that's done, or you knew somebody that's done this, like maybe reconsider a little bit. But also that it's okay to feel weird about it. I mean, I don't feel guilty. I don't know. Like, I don't really feel guilty about it. I just feel like I have questions, like, and I don't know, there's something there that I'm not completely, I don't have a lot of closure on, but I've also never been through the situation. So I can't say, I don't really know.
Yeah. And I would say, going back to earlier, that's definitely something that you do not bring up to someone that you feel like maybe contemplating dying by suicide, and they may be close. Like, don't think like,
I hear you.
Like, hey, that's fucking selfish if you're going to do that. Like,
that's not making the situation better is what we know.
Yeah.
Like, that's not encouraging.
Yeah. Cause, and I imagine it, like, imagine being in a dark place and contemplating dying by suicide, or how am I going to do it? Whatever the case may be, and seeing on Instagram, what are your thoughts on suicide and being selfish? And then that person that is just trying to get one sign to maybe not go through with that act, and they see selfish, and they're like, now I'm fucking selfish.
Yeah. I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Like
and then
and now I'm selfish too. Like, that was checking off that final box for me.
Yeah. So I think it's, obviously it's okay to have your own opinion, like with everything. But I think it's important to be aware of how saying that suicide is selfish can be construed by people that are going through a dark time.
Just validating that they're a mess. Yeah. Or that they were a mess for that matter. Versus,
yeah. Cause then after the fact, and a statistic, our first responders and veterans are like 2 times as likely to die by suicide than a civilian, by the normal person.
Yeah, this is, again, I don't think is well known.
No, it's not. And so the whole 22 veterans a day where they do push-ups, and what year do you think that started in?
I have no idea, man.
2003.
Yeah, so do the math. Yeah. It's 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like to say it's between, well, I fucking hate to say it actually, but an average is 175 to 200 people we're losing a day. Veterans, in my opinion, based on doing this, based on talking to people, from seeing and hearing stories. I think it's across the board, it's probably 175 to 200, unfortunately.
It's heavy.
So, and it's specifically with the veteran community, a big topic that we've kind of started to discuss is a transition from being in the military to civilian life. So the transition is very difficult. Mm-hmm. So imagine being in combat, and then 48 hours later, you're walking downtown San Jose, going to get some dinner. Like, yeah, it's complete culture shock. How are we supposed to expect that veteran to 45 hours difference from being in combat in this, your life is on the line, you're losing buddies, to walking downtown San Jose and expect them to be fine? Yeah,
and all the people around you dealing with, like, and talking about the most trivial shit in the world. Like,
yeah. So that leads into a whole different topic of conversation, where it's the demobilization process, where all the veterans just want to get through the line that they're in to go check in with the therapist, and then they lie about their alcohol intake so that they can get the initials from the person, and then when they're done with their list, they can go check out. And then if you're not getting out of the military straight from deployment, you kind of just like, you hit your years of service and you get your DD-214 form and you're out. There's nothing other than that. So I think that's a contributing factor to specifically our veteran community, which are dying by suicide, because you're with a team all the time.
Right. You have your buddies
all the time.
Right. And whether you're, let's say, mentally and emotionally healthy or not, at least you have that and you have that connection.
Yep.
And I have that responsibility, or I have that commitment to these guys, and I'm not going to do that here. But now all of a sudden you're alone.
Yeah. And you're completely alone, and you find yourself and we just did an episode with this prior Marine, and he's currently living in Florida, where he discussed that, where he was like, I was on a shitty futon, a broken futon. And he's like, I made the decision to kill myself. It was done. So he went into all that, but that happens way more often than we think.
Yeah.
So that's the military side of it. And then the first responder side, it's, I think we're losing more first responders on duty or during their years of service than after.
Do you mean like retirement or just
retirement?
Yeah,
yeah.
like
we're losing
out.
more during their, like when they first started to actually retiring, like in between that time frame to dying by suicide, than retirement time.
Yeah, well, I mean the stats speak for themselves. Like we've got people leaving faster than we're bringing them in, and a lot of them are the more veteran people. But I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, I've learned about more people that have made less than 10 years, right, and moved on, or they're somewhere around. Seems to be like that 15th year right now. If you've been on about 15 years and you've had to deal with a lot of the things that have happened, obviously over the course of your career, but a lot of what's going on in the last couple of years. Let's be honest. I don't know what it's like, but I feel like I have my finger on the pulse. It'd be really tough to be in the law enforcement community right now and feel like you're making a difference. Whether it's because you've been told you got to dial it back, or, because we've decriminalized things, or we've just stopped putting resources and time into dealing with the realities of what's going on. I think it's probably all contributing factors. And I don't think we've really realized the reality of what that's created, both in the short and the long term. Mm-hmm. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah. And I have seen a huge turn in awareness for mental health. And I think as we continue to more talk to people and I learn more about it, there is more awareness out there, more resources. So I'm glad to see that there's a turn.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have to be honest, like so many more people want to talk about it. And I feel like we've got a little bit of momentum going where it's the stigma is starting to be acknowledged, at least. And I think that's the first part, is being acknowledged. And then it's moving on to then, okay, now what are we going to do to make it better? Despite the haters and despite some of the negativity that's out there, because we need cops on the street. We need first responders on the street. What's going on with our fire department right now? Like, the state of California is literally burning down. We don't have enough firefighters to fight the fires.
Yeah. And that's so much on the table. There's family life that you have to keep into play. There's everything that goes into it. And then there's also like we just heard before we started talking, is we're losing teenagers to suicide,
right?
To bullying. Not even the first responder military.
They haven't even made it there.
Discuss them enough. Like our normal civilian community is like there's not much awareness. Like it's great that for our first responder we have the EAP military community, we have the VA, but like what's really out there for our teens these days? Mm-hmm. And like the way that social media is with TikTok, all these TikTok challenges that are like, hey, try to kill yourself this. Like there have literally been reports of death by suicides in our teenager community because of TikTok.
Look, man, if people listen to the show enough, they know I have like this deep internal resistance to the whole social media community as a whole. But it's very tough for me. Like I recognize the power. I think there could be some positivity in it. Unfortunately, I think it's run wildly out of control. And it's become very problematic. it's tough for me to be involved with it. I struggle with it on a daily basis. God, am I contributing to the problem here? I like to think that I'm not. I think we try to be really careful about what we put out and try to do a better job probably than a lot, but it's mindless, man. There's so much mindlessness out there, and mindlessness creates a lack of awareness. And so I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's terrible. I'd say a majority of the calls for service that I've been to personally with attempts to die by suicide are with people under 21.
That's so sad.
And they
haven't even started to live life yet.
Yeah, and it's normally like the cutting of the wrist, but like not doing it it's terrible to fucking say, but like not doing it the right way,
Gotcha.
like where you're actually going to bleed out.
Gotcha.
And then you're like, okay, did they do it for attention, or are they actually trying to, but they don't actually know how to do it the proper way if you're going to try to actually take your life, which is just terrible to even think about and have to respond to calls like that. But like bullying these days and the TikTok, all this, like I haven't heard much about awareness and what's out there for our teenagers and our like the students in college. Because I know there's a huge number of...
Well, I think a lot of them fall into the modern medical health management system, and which is woefully lacking. I mean, again, anybody that listens to the show knows my feelings on the insurance system and kind of in the medical system and how it works. I think it's while Western medicine can bring a lot of great things to the table, I think, there's so many things that... there's so much, let's just say we're not in a good situation. I mean, if you just mentioned, first responders are waiting weeks to get appointments. I've had some personal situations. I have some people very close to me in my life that have waited weeks at times where they didn't have weeks. And if they had not had the supportive family and sort of this village around them to kind of keep them going and keep them up, and off the ledge, for lack of a better term, the outcomes of that could have been, terminal. Yeah, terminal. Yeah. So, yeah, man. Listen, man, without the whole context of this was really to just kind of talk about the things and have a conversation. And You've actually and just doing it and kind of being open about it. I don't think I've had this much conversation about it ever in my life, even with the people that I've been closely involved with, because I feel like in the times where I've been kind of close to people that have been like in a really, really bad place, I've been reserved, very reserved. And in this conversation, I haven't been. And that's because I'm not talking to somebody that is immediately dealing with a mindset or is an emotional or psychological place to where they're having a really rough time. And I guess what I've learned through this conversation is that I probably should be talking about it more and checking in probably more with people. Not like, hey, are you suicidal? Because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, but just more being kind of aware of the things that are out there. And while I've certainly have a more heightened awareness, particularly with my friends and what I consider my family in law enforcement and in the first responder community, I think a lot can be said for, just checking with those people around you and making sure that you're in whatever situation, your professional life, your personal life, your relationships, just kind of checking in. And I think if people probably checked in with their loved ones, if you will, more often, we might be able to avoid a lot of this stuff. And that might sound really obvious, but I would challenge people listening right now. Are you doing that? Because I know I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not either.
You're doing it when you switch on the podcast and when you're doing that part of that other job, if you will. But there's also the day-to-day and whatnot. So hopefully what we take away from sort of the awareness piece of this, of what, this, suicide awareness, topic is just, we need to check in with one another more, man. And be aware that people are struggling out there. There's invisible shit that's going on, but you don't have to have the answers for them. But sometimes just the checking in piece is the is the thing that could drive them to get the help that they need, or open up about the conversation where they purge the valve, maybe take one of those rocks out of their backpack, or prevent them from picking up the next rock and just shoving it in there. And again, I think you and Jesse and your team, what you guys are doing over there at the Overwatch is important shit, really important shit. And I feel honored to even just be here having this conversation with you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from and meeting the people that are more involved with your organization. And I hope that people here feel like, hey, look, I might not be getting the answers I need, or I might not feel like I have the answers that I want right now, but I have there could be some resources out there. Maybe I need to reach out to these guys. So if they want to find out more about what the Overwatch is doing, and they feel like they might need a buddy to talk to, or maybe just get some insight from, how do they reach out to you guys?
Yeah, go to theoverwatchcollective.com. Has the contact us at the bottom of every page. Share your story, first name, last name, keep it anonymous, whatever it may be. There's the buddy program on there where you can go on and talk to anybody you want that you match with, totally free. Send them an email. We don't even find out about it unless the actual buddy says hey, I had coffee with someone.
Right.
That's all that we get. So you can reach out to them anytime, completely confidential. It's free, and it's people that have been through what you're going through.
Right.
Which we think is super important. Instagram is simple. It's just the Overwatch Collective. I'm sure you'll see it on Ironside's podcast. We literally go back and forth posting each other's stuff, because it's all amazing stuff, and we want to get all this out there. Just Facebook, the Overwatch Collective. Pretty much type in the Overwatch Collective on Google,
and you'll get it. Yeah.
It'll come up, and hit us up whenever. It's me and Jesse that run the page. You'll know that because we still fuck up words and we can't spell right sometimes on our stories.
You guys are ex-Marines. You guys don't know how to spell.
So you know that it's us running it when we can't spell fucking simple words.
Love it.
So,
but I think there's another piece of this too, and that is if you want to contribute in some way, you can also do that there, right? Look, if you're just hey, I want to give to these guys in whatever way, I have a resource that I can provide. I have a skill. I'm a professional and I want to be involved in some way, or you want to make a donation, you can do that there too, right? Yeah.
And it's so, like we said, when we came up with it, it's a collective effort. So it's not just us. We're not looking for any satisfaction, a pat on. We don't care about all that. We're just trying to help the community and work with the community to save some lives. So, if you have resources, or you want to come on a podcast, or you have a story to share that you want to go on the story, or a post that might help someone, the sky is the limit. So we have that. We could take donations. We're a full 501c3 nonprofit.
Right.
So any donation that we get comes with our 501c3 and a tax exempt letter to that person with the name, address, dated donation, amount of donation, description. I got that down to a T.
Write that shit off.
Yeah, you got one coming for you after the fundraiser for donating. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a full tax write-off. And then everything that we get, all donations, grants, everything is going right back to the community to pay for therapy, counseling, retreats, whatever it may be to help you. So yeah, and then we're also taking sponsors for our podcast in the future. So as of now, we have the 3-Step Realty Group. So they're California Realty Group. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home within the state of California, hit them up. And you mentioned the Overwatch Collective. They're giving 20% of their commission to our nonprofit.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So if you mention the Overwatch...
In California, that's quite a bit of money in a lot of cases, man.
Yeah. So they're in the process with one veteran right now that's going to be purchasing a home through us.
Okay.
So that's potentially $6,000 or $7,000 to us if it goes through.
Awesome.
And then that just allows us to be able to pay for another 4 or 5
sessions,
people to go to therapy. So that's literally it. That's the whole mission of it. It's just the raise awareness, save one life. That's all that we care about.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate what you guys are doing. And like I said before, keep doing important shit, man, because it's important. Appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your busy schedule with all the things that are going on. And, I cannot wait for the 24th.
I'm so excited. You have no idea.
It'd be good to see you.
You have no idea. I appreciate your support so much, having us on before to come talk about everything. And having me back on. I feel honored to be on this for a second time. Unfortunately, I don't have my better half here.
Yeah. Give that dude a hug for me. When
he'll be on the 24th. You'll see him.
Man.
You'll show him a little extra love since he's not here.
All right, Jesse. Can't wait to see you, man. Thanks again, Greg.
Appreciate it. Thank you.